guys, welcome to my practical intermediate Narmaya guide. In this video, I will be talking about her strengths and weaknesses, basic game plans, and some tips that I've prepared and practical combos. To preface, I recently managed to reach S rank with Narmaya, so this will be mostly things that I learned during my climb to S rank. So, Narmaya is one of the most popular characters in the game, but she's also one of the most difficult. So as of this recording, I haven't found too many videos here on YouTube that talk about the things I want to share. So I wanted to make a condensed guide to share some of the more practical elements of learning Narmaya. And hopefully these are some of the things that you can implement into your gameplay immediately to help level up your Narmaya. So one more quick preface before we jump in. This is a intermediate guide, so I'm going to assume that you understand the basic abilities that Narmaya has and that you've played her at least a little bit. So I'm going to be covering more intermediate to advanced style tips. If you don't know about her abilities or sort of her basic game plan, there's plenty of guides out there for beginners on Narmaya, so I definitely recommend that you check those out. Okay, so let's take a minute to talk about some of Narmaya's strengths and weaknesses, just in case you're not sure whether or not you want to play her in ranked or if you want to learn her as a character. So let's just take a look at what tools she has and what kind of things she has to overcome if she wants to be successful. So first off, she's extremely versatile. She has a lot of tools in her toolkit. She has an ability basically for every situation. She's privileged enough to have a meterless reversal move. She's got okay poke. And she's got quite good gap closers, depending on the situation. She also is a corner combo monster. I'm sure you've seen plenty of clips of her absolutely popping off on people in the corner. She also has pretty decent pressure, especially in her blue stance. A lot of her tools are plus on block. So you do have the ability to sort of make sure that you pressure people in the corner and try and get an opportunity to bait them into a move. She also has some quite good ultimate skills that can be very effective if used correctly. We'll talk a little bit more about them later. So on to her weaknesses. Obviously, she's one of the most difficult characters in the cast to play. Sometimes it can feel like you're working super hard for results that other characters can kind of jam out very easily. Jita's a great example. She's got a very nice bread and butter combo that's pretty easy to hit, but does basically half your health, and she also has the ability to carry you in the corner very quickly, so she definitely feels like she's working a little bit overtime. It doesn't help that she has two different stances, and many of her more optimal combos require you to switch back and forth between your stances many times in the middle of each combo. So Narmaya is also pretty weak mid-screen. If you don't want to spend any BP or don't have any meter, she does not have very good mid-screen damage output. Some characters can deal quite a bit of damage to you if they open you up mid-screen without spending any meter, but with Narmaya, if you don't have any meter, the most you'll really be able to get is 1, 2, 3 into a special. She doesn't have very many follow-ups out of that. She also doesn't have a ton of great mix-ups, especially in this game with the guard button. If your opponent is utilizing the guard button, her left-right mix-ups are much less effective since that auto swaps the guard for you. Also, her flip move is not an overhead, which means it is not a true high-low mix-up. So she can have a bit of a hard time getting in on people who are very defensive and very good at taking your strike throw mix-ups. She also has relatively low range on her moves. Her lights are pretty stubby. She's got pretty decent range on some of her other abilities, but they're also relatively slow. So she definitely can struggle with getting outranged by people who can poke her before she's able to get in on them effectively. Her fireball is also pretty decent as a poke tool, but it is not very good for zoning, so against matchups where you're trying to keep people away from you, it's not a very effective tool for keeping people out. It's pretty fast on startup, but it is pretty slow, so it's very susceptible to people jumping in over it onto you and punishing you for spamming it too often. Okay, so now that we understand Narmaya's strengths and weaknesses, I want to talk a little bit about her basic game plan. Generally, in neutral, you want to play pretty patient. Your goal is to poke and confirm stray hits in order to carry your opponent into the corner, where you can start your deadly corner combos and pressure with your blue stance. Versus aggressive opponents that like to trap you in the corner, make sure you're abusing your reversal and your guard breaks in order to take your turn back and get yourself out of sticky situations in the corner. Your guard break is extremely useful in that it makes sure that you don't have to block any crazy mix-ups. Just be careful to make sure that you're using your guard break while you are in block stun, as if you hit it too early or too late, you will get Raging Strike, which can also get you blown up in the corner, which is certainly not ideal. Versus zoner heavy matchups, make sure that you are using your transient to gap close and punish moves that are laggy. And then once you have some meter, make sure you are using your ultimate skills to skip neutral and punish laggy moves. In regards to what stances to use, I've seen some pretty decent pressure guides with the different stance types, but in general, your blue stance is going to have more of your pressure tools, as your lights and lows are more plus, and your pink stance is going to give you access to your fireball, so you have the ability to poke and fireball people from range and try to keep them out a little bit more and force them to approach you. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about some practical tips that we can use to improve our Narmaya and some shortcuts we can take so that we are not overly complicating the learning process of this character, because this character is already complex enough as it is. Therefore, anything we do to simplify the process of learning this character and make it more accessible for more people will be the objective of these tips. So the first tip I'll give that was useful for me is regarding stances, and that tip is to pick a stance that you're most comfortable with and try and stay in that stance for most of the time. Once you get more advanced with stances, you can definitely use your stances more situationally or depending on matchup, but for my part, for most of my climb to S rank, I mostly stuck with the pink stance, mostly because it gave me easy access to my blue stance abilities in the form of transient. If you learn to end all of your combos in the same stance, it can help alleviate a lot of the issues and confusion of which stance you're in and which abilities you have available to you. The next tip I want to give is to simply use simple inputs. This character is already complex enough as it is, and her combo strings are so complicated with having to switch back and forth between stances that using simple inputs can make these combos much easier to manage. Now, the number one thing I hear from people when I tell them to use simple inputs is that there is a damage penalty. But I think the thing that most people don't understand is that the damage penalty only applies to abilities that are used in neutral. So to demonstrate, if we use EX Fireball here using simple inputs, we will get 1300 damage. If we use the technical inputs, we'll get 1430. Now watch what happens when I use it in a combo string. All right, we get 2300 damage with the simple input, and I get 2300 damage with the technical input. You can see my inputs on the left. So because I used it in a combo string, there is no difference in damage by using the simple or technical inputs. This means that when you're doing a combo in the corner, there is actually 0 damage penalty for using the simple inputs. So, my advice is to turn technical inputs off in order to avoid situations where you're trying to do an ability and accidentally get something else. A very common scenario is when you're holding down back and then want to do a forward special. But with technical input, it's very easy to accidentally get super because you're doing that down forward special motion. So in order to avoid situations like that, my advice to keep this practical guide short is to simply turn off technical inputs and just use simple inputs to make your life a lot easier. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about are Narmaya's ultimate abilities. For the most part, Narmaya's ultimate abilities are used to punish people using laggy moves from full screen. I'm referring mostly to her back specials in both stance. Her back special in her pink stance sends you behind the opponent, with invincibility, and her back special in the blue stance sends you into a advanced version of your overhead move, which is fairly plus and allows you to punish people pressing laggy buttons from full screen. This can often net you big damage if you are in a quote fireball war with someone who wants to stand across the screen and throw fireballs at you. Now, there are some caveats about these abilities that I want to talk to you about really quick. The first is that, especially for the pink stance back special, you are not fully invincible until you disappear. So in the first few startup frames, if you try to use this move in the corner and the enemy is up in your grill and trying to hit you with an ability, you will not be able to get out. So as you can see there, the startup of my special came out, but I was not able to get out of the corner because my invincibility frames had not kicked in yet. Another thing to note, the overhead back special will get clipped by fireballs and moves that hit slightly above and in front of the enemy character, so be wary of using this ability when there is already an active hitbox in front of the opponent, as you will get clipped by it. There is no invincibility on the hitbox of this ability. Her other ultimate ability of note is her ultimate fireball, which crumples the opponent and allows you to follow up with additional damage. This is not only useful for comboing in the corner, but allows you to extend your damage mid-screen if you have the meter to use it. Just be sure only to do 2 attacks after your Raging Strike follow-up, as if you do a third, the ultimate fireball will no longer connect. Narmaya's last ultimate ability is the ultimate version of her multi-slash. This move is useful as a finisher for combos, as it's usually not possible to follow up after it. However, it does have some pretty surprising range, which allows you to do some interesting things like this mid-screen confirm. The timing on this combo is pretty tight, so you may have to practice it, which is also why I prefer to use the other version of the mid-screen combo, utilizing the crumple instead of this. However, the damage on this one is slightly higher. So here are a few other small tricks or gimmicks I've discovered with the character that may help you catch your opponents off guard. One thing I like to do is do a medium fireball into a light, which lets you double up your fireballs and potentially catch opponents off guard. You can even hold the medium fireball even longer, but most of the time people are not expecting that second fireball to come out very quickly, so if they guard the first one, the second one may catch them. You can even do a heavy version on the second version to try and knock your opponent back. The next tip I have is regarding the side swap with the medium transient. If you don't know, the medium transient sends you to the other side of the character. However, unlike the ultimate version, you do not have any invincibility. However, in neutral, sometimes it can be a good tool to mix up your opponent from a left-right perspective. If you do manage to score a knockdown on your opponent from the corner, you can also use it to steal the corner from them. This is a very handy way to take the corner back and then allow you to continue your pressure since you're already so close to the corner. Another thing to note is the importance of using Raging Strikes when you're mid-screen in order to carry your opponent further towards the corner. In certain situations, the additional distance that a Raging Strike will carry your opponent will allow you to carry them all the way to the corner and continue your combo in the corner. So be mindful of where you are on the screen and whether or not it's appropriate to use the Raging Strike follow-up in order to get your opponent to the corner to continue your combo. The final tip I have for you guys is that you need to focus on your fundamentals before your combos. You really only need to know 3 combos really, one for the corner, one for mid-screen, and one as an anti-air. Once you have these 3 combos down, you're pretty much set for most scenarios, and the rest of your success or failure with this character will be determined by your fundamentals and your ability to play Grand Blue as a whole. So be sure to familiarize yourself with all of the system mechanics, make sure that you are actively studying the game and how to play neutral well, and analyzing your replays to understand why you are succeeding or failing in particular areas of your matches. Understanding the proper flow of neutral, when you can punish people and when they are punishing you for laggy options, is going to make a huge difference in your gameplay. So as I stated at the beginning of this video, this is intended to be a practical Narmaya guide. The idea is to simplify this character to make her a bit more accessible for people who might be intimidated by her difficulty. However, there is still so much to learn, and I'm still learning a ton about the character. And as you start to get better with the character, you can obviously add in more advanced things, such as using technical inputs if you want, or learning more advanced combos. But the idea for this guide was simply to give everyone a simple starting point and make the character more accessible. So to wrap this up, I hope this was an informative guide giving you all the tips I learned when I climbed to S rank with Narmaya, and hopefully this will help you as well. If you enjoyed this guide, please feel free to like it and share it with anyone else who you think might enjoy learning more about the game, and best of luck out there on the ladder. Alright, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.